Anybody else want to ask a question?
Sure, I have a,
Go ahead.
I just have a short filler question. I just know from knowing you personally a little bit that you have the proud distinction, I believe your parents were missionaries. I wondered if that afforded any non-traditional educational opportunities in your family, like where you have direct experience with, kind of homeschool or church school, that kind of thing that you might share.
Well, just I've had a little bit of everything back in high school because my parents were foreign missionaries before they went over to what was Rhodesia, then became Zimbabwe in January 1974. I was educated in a Christian Reformed Christian school in my hometown of Muskegon. There are a lot of Dutch people who live in places like Muskegon, Grand Haven, Grand Rapids. So many of us go to Christian schools and then matriculate to Calhoun College. So I did that until early '76. And I'm probably the only lawyer in the history of the legislature, or for that matter, the history of law practice in Michigan, who doesn't have a high school degree. People say, well, how did that happen? Well, I took correspondence programming when we were out in the bush in eastern highlands of Rhodesia, and as soon as I was done with that, I came back to Michigan in '76 and started my college career at Muskegon Community College. So, in answer to your question, there's no question in my mind that the requirement to be adaptive and learn other manners of becoming educated rather than, I had that in K-12 as a younger elementary student, but after early elementary was always in a Christian school, and I think it equipped me for much that came later in life in terms of being hardy enough, being resourceful enough to get through just about anything that could be thrown at one. So, good question. I do have probably different high school and elementary experiences than anyone in the legislature. Some of my colleagues laugh when I tell them I'm not high school educated, but I went to college and grad school and law school. But it definitely gave me an opportunity to see from a different vantage, different ways people could be well educated.
Well, just a slight follow-up, I was going to say, if you would share with us, or even just reflect, or even share with the legislature, how would your parents, strong Christian Reformed, Protestant Christian missionaries, how would they feel if someone had put them on a list as that they were a risk because their children were not in a traditional K-12 education system? Because here in Michigan, that's been the case. And, I wonder too how that legislature, if they consider how many people who I consider to be a real success story like yourself have that non-traditional experience, probably more times than not due to a higher income bracket or more elite status, as the superintendent discussed earlier. But I wonder if they're really looking to find out what yields what different results, because I think yours is an educational success story.
I don't know what my parents would have perceived. My dad's been dead since 1989, and my mother since 2011. If they were alive, they would turn 100 this year. It's kind of remarkable when I think of that. It tells me I'm getting old too. When I apprehend my parents would have been 100 this year. In addition to my dad's experience teaching in public K-12 in the Michigan system and overseas, and also at a Christian school in the States. He too was a board member of a fledgling Christian school. Get this, although we went to Christian Reformed schools, my parents were Baptist. So talk about being in all kinds of different things at the same time. They talk different languages too, from one another. So he and others from Baptist churches in Muskegon were starting a Baptist Christian school at the same time. Us kids were all going to a Christian pro school. I speculate that my parents, and especially my father, wouldn't have wished to be on the list and would be very angry at being on any kind of list, as if the education he sought for his children was somehow inferior to that which the state directed.
Thank you for that honesty.
Brings us full circle back into the question Mr. Schatz asked at the beginning, which, well, what is my educational experience? And it's very unusual. And not all educational systems need to be data-driven. Not all educational pursuits need to be data-driven, because some people are not necessarily, some students are not necessarily going to succeed in the same way in traditional K-12 education, public parochial charter. Yes, Justin. And then we'll get to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the fellow from the library and the physician's assistant, especially the statement about a government department needing to use 100% of its budget so that it would get at least that and then be able to request more. I've heard that at every level of government in my involvement over the last 20 years. I'm sure you have as well. It's a disturbing truth, and it's the dark side of human nature. We've heard a ton tonight about the positives of people having freedom and choice and what they can do with that positively, and that's good too, but there's things that we have to watch out for with human nature, and the one is, like the physician's assistant pointed out, about that tendency that when you're trusted with any kind of authority to take that as an authority to erode the sovereignty of anyone that you're entrusted over. And that seems to be the disturbing trend in government. We've all always noticed the saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think where that applies here specifically is it's already illegal to neglect your children's education. We heard someone talking tonight about a grandparent suing for custody due to saying the education wasn't up to snuff. It's already against the law to neglect your children. It's already against the law to murder your children. They didn't need to do anything for homeschoolers to keep that being illegal. But what is going on here is a push towards a little bit more oversight. And where that particularly sticks in my craw, here locally, lately, at a Bedford Township Planning Commission meeting, these are people entrusted with such a tiny fraction of authority. They're on a planning commission, they only make a few bucks per meeting. It's not like this is sending them to DC. But the corruption happened immediately. I was so disturbed when I heard them, they were reviewing a solar ordinance, and they said that they wanted to pad something in there to say that if you were going to move out of a house and it wasn't going to be lived in, that you would have to remove all the solar equipment off of it and have the township come in and inspect and verify that you did and everything. And they vocally stated, open in a public meeting, that the reason to pad that in there was to just give themselves one more little opportunity to have a presence. One more little opportunity to be able to control the lives of the residents and the citizens and the properties. They openly stated that between the township officials there and the government insider experts that were there. And that pervasiveness is what we're after stopping here. Yeah, sure, a registration could hypothetically, potentially be used for some kind of benefit. We all get that. But also, wouldn't it be the easiest thing to just put an arm banner with like a yellow star on it for all the homeschool children so we could identify them most easily and make sure that they were being educated? Yeah. But at some point you have to say we have rights and freedoms. That's all I'm saying.